I'm Tom Gillesberg, candidate in Copenhagen for the Friends of the Schiller Institute. We are running a slate here in Copenhagen of 5 candidates, and in Aarhus, the second biggest city of Denmark, with 2 candidates. This is one of our 500 campaign posters we put up here in Copenhagen. They have 300 in Aarhus. We just printed, or are in the process of printing, 40,000 campaign newspapers. We of course have our home pages, and we are right now in this otherwise totally ridiculous, nonsensical election campaign, putting in the real issues of today, which will decide our future. Are we going to get a GlassSteagall banking separation, or are we going to get EU fascism, banking union, bail-in, and all the horrors which some countries of Europe like Cypern, Greece and so on already experience, but which will also be in stock for us if we do not change the policy.
Why are you running for city council in Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark?
Well, because nobody else is going to raise the really decisive question at this time for Denmark, for Copenhagen, and for Europe and the world. What do we do about this global financial crisis that we are right now in the midst of? The official politicians in Denmark, the government, don't even really recognize it. They don't discuss it, they don't talk about it. So we have to bring it into the discussion. And we also have to bring into the discussion the only solution there is to this crisis in Denmark and internationally, a GlassSteagall bank separation, which can do away with this gigantic financial bubble that has been building up now over decades, and which were not solved by the measures in 2007-2008. And at the same time saying, yes, we need a GlassSteagall banking separation now, immediately, for Denmark, for Europe, for the world, but at the same time we also need a credit system. We need the Danish National Bank to issue credits for big infrastructure projects, like a bridge from Zealand to Jutland, with the beginnings of a Danish maglev networks, which could actually lift the whole Danish economy to a higher platform, but also to finance other projects, like the already decided for a tunnel to Germany under Femern Belt, like a tunnel between Denmark and Sweden, a new tunnel from Helsingør to Helsingborg, and at the same time also to invest in what will be the future, a fusion economy, that is a massive investment into fundamental research, into fusion, into conquering the subatomic domain, and that Denmark will take a much greater part in what is also the other side. One side of research is to going into the extremely small and control the powers of the nucleus of the atoms, but at the same time go to the big. We need to be part of a massive crash program for getting back into space, for beginning to understanding and conquering nearby solar system, nearby space, and use that as a platform for us to, as mankind, to perform our mission of actually bringing life and cognitive life further out into space, but at the same time also, as we saw with the crash Apollo program in the 60s, this is also the way of opening up new doors, new understandings, of creating new scientific breakthroughs and new technologies we need in order to solve the problems we have on Earth today.
What is your campaign slogan, and what does that have to do with running for city council?
Well, our campaign slogan is GlassSteagall, not EU fascism. The banking union will steal your money and your life. And this is the fundamental question we're standing in front of right now in Denmark. On the good side, we are not part of the Euro system. Therefore, we still have potentially sovereign powers of doing, of really reviving a national economy, credit system, these kind of things. But at the same time, we have up until now been committed to perpetuating the EU system and the EU bureaucracy ideas of right now solving the financial crisis with both bailout to the banks and bail-in, taking the money from regular bank deposits in order to salvage a bankrupt financial system. And if we allow this to go forth, this is fascism, as we saw it in Greece, as we've seen it in Cyprus. There's no other way for it. This is exactly the policy that was backed by the leading financial circles in the 30s, backed by bringing Hitler to power in Germany, Mussolini to power in Italy, Franco, and so on and so forth, in order to have a strong government that brutally could enforce austerity policies on the populations at large. And this is right now the policy of the European Union. And if we go along with it, we will get the austerity policies, we will get the killing of our population, and we will get modern day fascism. It might not be with swastikas, it might be with sun symbols of different sorts. But the point is the policy will be the same: sacrifice the people in order to salvage and save a bankrupt financial system. And under those circumstances, we have to learn from history. We have to learn the grand lesson of what Franklin D. Roosevelt did in the United States when he came to power in 1933, which was the opposite policy of what was carried out in Europe, which was, instead of saying we need austerity, we need to give Wall Street and the banks what they want, was to say, no, we shut down Wall Street. If they survive, it's on their own terms, no public money for that. What we need public money for is to invest in an economy, is job creation programs, it's to develop the economy with big infrastructure projects, to build up the real physical economy. And as Roosevelt say, that a good economic policy will lift all boats, not just for the top high-level people, which, as we've seen under Bush and Obama in the United States and similar policies in Europe, or since 2007, 2008, well, the rich have gotten richer, but the rest of the economy has been sinking dramatically. Now, some people will say, hey, this is not normal municipal elections. Shouldn't you speak about having more traffic regulations or wider sidewalks? But the point is, if we don't solve this, there will be no money for normal running a city like Copenhagen. Then we will, in Copenhagen, sooner or later end up where Detroit has ended up, by being bankrupted by these financial deals, and then having basically to cut everything that keeps a city alive, from firemen to policemen to teachers, even things like hospitals, whatever is being cut in order to keep feeding the financial bubble. In Copenhagen, luckily, and in Denmark, we are not at the point where Detroit are yet. But if we allow this policy to go forth, then we will end up there sooner or later. So therefore, we are using this, the fact that there are elections right now, the fact that we have an opportunity of breaking the normal media control, where you only discuss certain issues and never discuss the real important issues like GlassSteagall separation unless you have to, and come out with these key issues at this time in order to be able to use these elections we have right now, municipal elections, in order to put the policy on the table which will save Copenhagen, which will save Denmark, and which will at the same time be part of a paradigm shift globally in order to have a bright future for mankind instead of this total destruction of what has been built up over many generations, this destructions which has been taking place over the last decade under this rotten, corrupt, degenerate political leadership in almost any country of the world.
This is not the first time that you're running in the elections. Can you say about the history of the election campaigns, the recent history of the election campaigns in Denmark, and what the effect has been in terms of our moral authority?
Well, everybody is aware here in Copenhagen especially, but also in Denmark in general, of the fact that I have played with my election campaign what some people would call a prophetic role, like the role that Lyndon LaRouche, for instance, has played in the United States, of coming out and stating what I would call the obvious, that nobody else seemingly saw. In 2005, a municipal election, we ran a big campaign which says, when the bubble pops, a new Bretton Woods financial system, which created quite a stir, and people says, how can you say that? And in this bubble we then had derivatives, house prices, hyperinflation, and people would say, how can you do that? How can you speak about derivatives on an election poster? How are people supposed to understand this? But exactly because I did bring that into the discussion, we did get a discussion about what is then derivatives. And even though most institutions says, oh, that's far out, that could never happen. It meant that as the discussion of a new Bretton Woods system suddenly came up in London and other places, of course as a fake part in London, people brought me in on television to say, well, what is a new Bretton Woods system? How could this work? In 2007, we had a big national election campaign for Parliament, where I ran as an independent candidate together with some of our friends, on the slogan, after the financial crash, maglev over Kattegat. And that raged a very big discussion. How can you say financial crash? Everything is fine, don't you see? It's super fine. It's never been finer. How can you discuss that? But which led to, in the time after the financial crash 2007, 2008, a lot, even journalists, came out and says, but you were right. You warned about this. People should listen to you. Because if you knew that this would happen, maybe you know what to do about it. And we know even on Christiansborg, among all layers that are concerned about what Denmark should do, and Christiansborg being the seat of the Danish parliament, everybody knew this. Everybody says, well, you were right about the financial crash. So we have unfortunately not reached the point where the Danish politicians and the Danish elites are willing to go all in and say, we know this system is going to break, go bust, therefore we need dramatic new solutions. Gillesberg have put them on the table. He is backed up by the authority of Lyndon LaRouche. Therefore, now we go with these policies. But having the election campaign right now is part of bringing that to bear. I mean, what we have been doing consistently over a long, long time is to discuss the unthinkable policies that has to be made real. And people will say, oh, that's unthinkable. But by us putting the policies on the table, the unthinkable has gone from being unthinkable to thinkable, but highly unlikely to be implemented. Now it's in there, it's in the heads of people. As the crisis will deepen, then it's our job to make sure that these policies are on the table, are known, and as the crisis deepens, this also will be implemented. Now the problem, of course, being in Denmark, Denmark is a relatively small nation with only 5.5 million people. We will not do that totally by ourselves, but if the United States, for instance, would go ahead with a revival of the GlassSteagall legislation, if US Congress tomorrow would reinstate GlassSteagall, then the day after it would be in the table of Denmark let's discuss doing the same here. So we are preparing the ground for this paradigm shift, which has to happen and which I'm sure is about to happen, because mankind and the history of mankind is far too important to go down the drain simply because some political leaders could not decide to make the decisions that have to be made in time.
And the last question, for seers in the United States, in Germany, in France, other places, what can this municipal election campaign here have an impact other places in the world? Why should people other places follow your campaign and the other candidates?
Well, they should let themselves be inspired. I mean, we're a small country of 5.5 million people. That does not mean we will sit back and I will sit back and simply be an observer of what's going to happen. I'll do what I can. We, the Schiller Institute here in Denmark, will do what we can to effectuate this paradigm shift, this shift in policies that has to take place. Other countries much smaller than us, like Iceland, has already played a very profound role in showing that there are other options than the suicide pact that the European Union and Barack Obama right now presents to us. So let's fight. We might be seemingly a small force, each individual place, wherever we are in a city here, in a city there, some in a country here, some in a country there. But because we are taking up an existential question which will have dramatic consequences for mankind's future, we can, if we choose to, play an important and decisive role in what is going to happen. And that's going to be made up of a lot of individuals deciding to put aside their normal concerns, their fears, their what you might in this perspective call their petty, small, ridiculous things, and say, okay, I'll take on a bigger mantle, we'll do this, we'll take a fight, we'll have fun taking this fight, and if we do that, and enough do that, then we will win. History has shown that again and again. We would not be 7 billion people in the world today if it was not because that these very few and far in between voices that has been thinking about these bigger concerns and been thinking about the future, if they had not at critical times been able to actually take over general policy.
Thank you very much, and the best wishes for the campaign.
Thank you.